Okay, ChooseFI fans, welcome back to the show today. This is going to be episode 18. And let me start by introducing our guest today. This is Jeremy from Go Curry Cracker. Jeremy and Winnie retired in 2012 to travel the world and start a family, and they did this while still in their 30s. On his blog, Jeremy shares how they were able to become financially and location independent at an extremely young age. They also share the specific details of what a full life of full-time travel and child rearing looks like, and they include photos, stories, and the cost of living for each country they visit. This is geo arbitrage at its finest. His signature articles include how they got over $10,000 of free travel to Europe, how they plan to never pay taxes again, which we're going to talk about today, how they invest in their portfolio, and why they will be renters for life. This is going to be a phenomenal episode. We're going high level with you today, and I hope you look forward to it.
You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, Brad, we're back in the studio today. We got Go Curry Cracker with us. I'm extremely excited that he's here with us today. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing great, Jonathan. Yeah, this is a real exciting one. Jeremy is definitely, in my opinion, on the Mount Rushmore of the FIRE community.
Mount Rushmore.
Yeah,
Fire.
yeah.
I love it.
We've got a lot of them in a row, right? We've got Mad Fientist, we've got Jeremy, we've got Jim Collins and JD Roth. We've got a real nice string of guests here. So this should be a good one.
I tell you what, if you don't know anything about the FIRE community and you listen to those 4 episodes, you are going to come away with a lot of good information. All right, Jeremy. Well, welcome to the studio with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Although I have to say, after that intro, I'm a little nervous. I don't know if I can live up to the hype.
Well, I certainly hope so. Well, we throw the bar out there, as high as possible, and then we just try to get close. So you're not in the United States. You are living the life. You're doing exactly what you say you're doing, and you're in geo arbitrage. And where are you and Winnie at right now?
Right now, we are in Taipei, Taiwan, and in a couple of weeks, we'll be in Paris. We're probably going to do about 4 months around Europe. And then after that, we have no idea.
Oh my goodness. You guys never run out of something to talk about, I'm sure. That's incredible.
So where the Europe trip, so 4 months, do you plan on, is it like slow travel at, a la how you do your normal travel? Is it going to be more of like a sightseeing type thing? Or talk us through that. Like, are you going to spend a month in each place, or what do you have planned?
I don't know, actually.
Oh, wow.
So so far we've booked 2 weeks in Paris, and then we're going to pass through Luxembourg and Brussels on the way to Amsterdam. That's going to take us a couple weeks, and then we fly to Athens. We'll be there a week, and then we think we're going to hit the islands around Greece for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks. We're not sure yet, and that's as far as we've outlined. And we have our Airbnbs and our flights for all of that. After that, who knows?
Wow, that's really cool. If I can make one suggestion, when you're near Brussels, definitely stop in Bruges, Belgium. It's really neat city. I've been there a couple of times, and it's one of the highlights of Europe for me. So if you can take a couple days there, definitely recommend it.
Okay,
cool.
Thank you.
And are you doing, I know you do travel rewards, right? Is this, I guess, based on your article of $10,000 of free travel to Europe? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah. So let's see here. Our actual flights from Taipei to Paris are in business class, and the actual retail value of those flights is something like $16,000. And we paid like $300 for it.
Nice.
So
wow,
it's a nice use of rewards points for that. It's probably one of the best, or probably the best valuation I've ever been able to pull off. So
nice. Which points are you? Sorry to interrupt, but which points are you using?
Well, this is from Alaska Airline Miles, booking a Asia to Europe flight on Cathay Pacific, but they only fly out of Hong Kong. But it was like 42,500 miles for business class. Like a great valuation. And then for the flight from Taipei to Hong Kong, we're flying on Cathay as well, but using Avios points that we transferred from Chase Ultimate Rewards. So we get those flights for only 4,500 miles.
Nice. That's fantastic.
That's
really
an extremely cool example.
And for anybody out there listening, Jonathan and I did a podcast, a really great intro to travel rewards and how to maximize them. That's at ChooseFI.com/009. So it's definitely a good listen.
Yeah. And as you get these tips on what people are doing, these extreme examples, you got to get that baseline in place. But then once you get just a few of those things, you can really start to do these really cool trips. And that is a crazy high valuation. How many points? What's the... We talk about trying to get 2 cents, 2 cents per point. What does that valuation come down at?
I did it's basically like 20 cents per point on my Alaska points, and something like 7 or 8 cents on the Avios points.
Well done, sir. Well done.
That might be the best I've ever heard. And I've dealt with a lot of people doing redemption. So good for you, man.
Thanks.
All right. Well, let me set you up to this. We really wanted to talk about how to retire in your 30s. I think you basically say that it's something that you can replicate if you know the rules. And specifically on this article, you said, in a world obsessed with bigger houses, faster cars, and luxury for the sake of luxury, we're a little bit odd. But conceptually, retiring in your 30s is very simple. It's quite simple, but not necessarily easy. Do you want to talk a little bit about the pillars that you pull on in order to retire in your 30s every time?
Sure. The main thing really is that you need to be able to save a high percentage of your income, right? And so if we think about it in like the simplest terms of, somebody saving 10% of their income, it means they're spending 90% of it. So, after about 9 years, no inflation, no interest, anything, just, they've saved a raw amount of dollars where they could cover about 1 year of your life, 1 year of their lifestyle. But if you were to save 50%, right, now after 1 year of work, you can take a year off. And if we push it even more extreme, if you're saving like 75% of your income, after 1 year, you can take 3 years off. And that's basically what we did. We were saving 70% for quite a number of years. And the last 3 years of work, I was saving my entire paycheck. We were just living off of our interest at that point. And when you do that for a decade, suddenly, my mom asked, when I told her I quit, she's like, "You have an emergency fund?" And I'm like, "Mom, I have a 60-year emergency fund."
Nice. What does her face look like when you tell her that? I can't even imagine.
Well, no, so she just kind of says, "Oh, okay. Well, hey, you kids have fun."
So I noticed that you said focus on a high savings rate, but you didn't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, earn $300,000 a year in order to do this. It's just a function of your savings rate. But of course, obviously maximizing your income, is a significant portion of that.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to save a high percentage on, say, $100,000 a year than it is on $10,000 a year. Like, absolutely. And so, it's a fairly common comment people make is, well, yeah, but nobody can do that on minimum wage, or nobody can do that on an average income. And like, people do it, definitely, and it has been done. But I also ask the question, well, why do you want to be average, right? Like, take a look at the type of jobs and positions that command high incomes and go after those, which will then enable you to have flexibility and career and options, and then one of those options being the ability to choose to not work again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I think part of what you say is, don't do conventional things, do unconventional things, make unconventional choices, focus on that 50 to 70% savings rate. And I think that in your article, you specifically said that by using tax advantage savings vehicles, you were able to increase that savings rate even higher.
Yeah. And just like, through the standard options people have, like their work 401k, through your traditional IRAs, the deductible investment options. Let's say you contribute just like $10,000 to your 401k, just for easy math, and you're in the 25% marginal rate. That's $2,500 in tax you don't have to pay that year. Now, the key then is to not spend that $2,500, but to invest it also, and that way you can build like the snowball that you're building of investment income and so on can grow that much faster. Like who doesn't want an extra 25% of free money?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the enemies of really getting started with this is debt. I know in your article you say if you have debt, the financial freedom clock begins when you get your debt to zero. That is a great quote right there. That's absolutely fantastic. You have so many more options when you're actually just starting from broke and not starting from negative 60 grand or negative 120 grand or whatever the student loan number is. Starting from zero can be a blessing.
Yeah, and when I graduated from college, I was 40K in the hole, and that was in what year did I graduate? 96. And so I look at if I adjust for inflation and interest rates and so on, that put me in like the top 5% of graduates for total debt load at that time. And it took roughly 6 years just to go from negative 40 to zero, and then 10 years from there to get to financial independence. And just think how much faster I could have done it without that headwind.
Yeah, and I think because of some of the information that you've spent time putting together, along with some of the other contributors that we've talked to, the next generation is probably going to be able to bypass a lot of that and do it a lot smarter, a lot more efficient than maybe we did it. We were kind of, you had to go out and find all this stuff. I mean, it just wasn't there for you. You had to go and collect all these ideas from different places and then put them together to make your own story. And I think the next generation will have the benefit of being able to bypass some of that and just see how you've kind of put some of these ideas together.
Yeah, Jonathan calls that second generation fire. And it's an interesting look. And I wonder, how you're going to deal with this, certainly college, right? So you're $40,000 in the hole when you come out. Like now, is there anything that you're going to do differently for your son when it's time for college for him?
Yeah, it's tough with, like at the time, I didn't really have any financial knowledge whatsoever. Like we grew up fairly poor, and I just knew that, hey, college was a way out. But I did it in probably the worst way possible. I went to a private school and with relatively high tuition, just because they offered me like a partial scholarship and they were really supportive in the application process and everything. But I probably would have, later my brother and my two youngest brothers actually had the option of taking community college classes while they were in high school. And so they were able to graduate with both their high school diploma and an associate's degree.
That is amazing. That we actually have someone that just wrote an article that's going to get released this Wednesday on dual enrollment. That is such a powerful vehicle that doesn't really get talked about as much as it should. And I love that, you hear that common theme more and more, that people are starting to figure that one out.
That's $20,000+ right there that I would have never had to pay back. And then if I would have gone to a state college rather than a private college, the tuition probably would have been in the order of a third of what it was. And, now we're looking at just like a car payment rather than like a mortgage. It's a much easier process to climb out of the hole. With my own son, we're actually looking at helping him build his financial independence portfolio starting from a young age. This year will be the first year that he has a Roth IRA with his earned income, which he earned just from modeling for photos for this interesting blog called Go Curry Cracker.
That's an excellent blog.
Have you heard of it? And he's also on the cover of my wife's book. So we wrote up some simple contracts where we pay him a small amount for his modeling services, and he can open his Roth IRA with that. The idea being that by the time he does hit 18, he'll have a fairly good nest egg already. And since your retirement accounts aren't considered in your financial aid applications, none of that will count against him on his aid metrics.
Well done, sir. Well done. Now, that number that you're paying him, is that less than $4,000?
Oh, yeah. This year is like $300.
Okay. All right. I was just curious because I know that, and we're going to get into a little bit more of the tax optimization, but I know that 4,000 is kind of this magical number where if your kids are making a salary less than that, you can turn taxable income into non-taxable income. I don't know. I won't get into that today, but I've heard that before from several accountants that are thinking about this stuff at a pretty high level. So
yeah, they're able to claim their own standard deduction, so they can actually earn $6,000 tax-free.
Very, very cool. All right. So do you want to maybe talk about a few of the levers that you pulled to get to retirement early, and specifically on how you slashed your expenses? And I'm thinking, one of them specifically transportation.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of like the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. Just, cut through there's so many different ways to save money. So I just looked at where does 80% of our money go? Housing, transportation, and food is typical. So transport, I just decided one day that I wasn't going to drive anymore. And I bought a bicycle for $50 on Craigslist. Sold my car and drove that bike for 2 years. Later sold it for $60. And so I basically made $10 on all my transportation costs for a couple of years. And so where most people are spending hundreds of dollars every month on gasoline and depreciation on their vehicle and whatnot, I was getting paid to ride my bike.
I think it's even higher than that. I think probably having a car costs you a minimum of almost $2,000 a year, even if you do it the right way. It's significant savings to make that choice. That's very cool. What about groceries? I know you mentioned that's in the 80-20 bill. What was y'all's plan for that?
Well, my wife one day decided, just kind of said like, hey, I really like cooking. I just never really kind of made it a focus before. And so she just went like all in on, I'm going to make it so that we just never want to go out to eat because like the food from this kitchen is the best in town. And she definitely got there. Like she could win Master Chef, I'm sure. But we kind of found where we live, so we're a block away from a grocery store, a block away from a farmer's market. And so we would kind of pick up, like go to the farmer's market at the end of the day. And when they're closing up and like, hey, what are you getting rid of? Like, what would you sell for cheap? So we pick up stuff that way. And then we also we had a CSA membership from a local farm. And this is like got to be one of the best values anywhere. They would just like overload these boxes. So for like $40 a week, we'd have more than a week's worth of produce. Like we would have to give it away. And so we largely just lived off of those boxes for 9 months out of the year and very seldom eating out. So that made sure our food budget was crazy low. And then, we would host parties, like, dinner parties and potlucks and stuff. And, like you'd be like, hey, you guys want to go out for, pay $50 for some eggs for brunch, or you want to come over and like, Winnie's going to make whatever. And they'd be like, oh, like we're coming over to your place. Like Winnie's cooking, we're coming over. And, so we would end up usually with like a surplus from that too of stuff people brought. And so we'd have leftovers for lunch for work for the next week.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know when we had Liz from Frugalwoods on, she talked about having people over and having potlucks, and it's just such a neat concept, right? To bring the community to you, to bring your friends to you, as opposed to, like you said, going out to, $50 would be a cheap dinner for many people, instead of spending $50 to $100 on, substandard fare, right? As compared to what Winnie's producing, you're spending a tiny little fraction of that. And, I just want to make sure that the audience caught just something minor you said, but it's just like an unconventional choice, but something that makes a difference is, you guys having the smarts to go to that farmer's market when it's closing and just getting a great deal on probably an enormous amount of, produce and food. And I mean, that's just such a little thing, but people don't think differently. And that's just such a nice little hack. So yeah, I mean, that's really, really well done for sure. Just real quick on the food. Do you have any idea? Have you guys ever done the calculation on like approximately what you spend per meal on home cooked meals? Is that something you've ever calculated?
Let's see here. I know for a time, I was trying to see if we could hit like the $1 per person per meal metric. And we never got there. Just an arbitrary number we threw out. Like, let's see if we can do that. And I want to say we probably ended up around like the $2 mark. And that's not like some pasta, with just like a little bit of veggies on the side. That's like a $50 dinner. It was an amazing amount of food, really high quality, good meats, like farm eggs, et cetera. But for like a couple bucks a person per meal.
Nice. That's fantastic. That's the exact number that my wife Laura and I always strive to hit for is $2 per person per meal. And we generally come plus or minus 20 cents on either side of that on average. And
nice.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's very plausible for most people. And unfortunately, like I think people just don't go out of their way to, again, think differently. Unfortunately, people are just so rushed that they go into the local food store and pick up the prepared foods, right? And those are usually like $6 to $8 per person minimum, per meal. And they generally are so small, they don't make leftovers. And it's just such an inefficient way of going about it to me. Whereas like we've talked about on a previous podcast, like, my wife, Laura, loves to cook. She sounds similar to Winnie in that regard. But, every single time we make a meal, we make certain there's an extra meal out of it. So, 4 person meals out of each time she cooks, essentially. So it adds so much time. And then it seems to lower the average cost per meal as well. So it's just that little hack that saves time and money. So I think that's a valuable thing for the audience to consider when they're talking food.
And there was one other thing I saw on your website that I just loved. I noticed under the cooking, you mentioned a specific book, and I have that book, and we got it last year as a gift, and it's fantastic. And it was the one on artisan bread. So are you guys still doing any of that?
Yeah. We don't have an oven right now.
Okay.
So we haven't done that for a while, but that was our entire bread, source of bread for years. You had a starter sitting in your refrigerator, and you just throw it in the oven every day. And
yeah, it's a phenomenal,
beautiful recipe.
So many options, great way to start, super simple recipe. So I have that exact one in my kitchen right now. One of the things, and this is one of my favorite things, to see what people in the fire community do for entertainment. And Brad hit on it a little bit, but I know specifically under bonus points, you mentioned, entertainment options. You would try to focus on things like having friends over for dinner, playing in the park, reading books from the library. And then you specifically mentioned, and I thought it was really cool, a soup cook-off at a friend's home.
I think for the most part, most of our entertainment was community based. It was just getting friends together, and mostly around food, but bike rides and games in the park and so on. But yeah, we had a soup cook-off. We had something regularly, like every 3 to 6 months or so, where we would just have a day where we would make whatever, and I know the soup one was a big hit. We did, we had several different kinds of pumpkin soup. We had different types of Italian kind of minestrone type soups and everything. And, we had 20 some different soups there. And that, for just a few dollars, you had, a whole evening's worth of entertainment.
Yeah, that's really neat. Did you find there was any resistance from your group of friends, or was this just something, I guess why I'm saying it in that manner is I struggle with, can we bring our friends into a more frugal lifestyle? Or are they going to be resistant to it? And I don't mean obviously beating them over the head with it. It's doing fun things, but doing it in a slightly more frugal manner. Did you go about it overtly, or was it just, hey, we're having this soup cook-off, let's all get together and have fun, and nobody's even thinking that they're only spending a couple dollars instead of, $100? Is that, how did you go about that?
Yeah, that's in a lot of ways, there was no master plan. It just kind of grew organically. And, we were very open about what we were trying to do. And so people were supportive of that. It was never, here come the weirdos again, they're gonna make us do some kind of home cooked meal or whatever. A lot of people were just interested that they knew there was going to be great food there because of who was making it. And, they liked hanging out with us. We liked hanging out with them. So it just worked.
Yeah, that's neat. And that kind of gets me to a larger question, taking a step back for a second instead of, we're obviously talking about specific tactics and such. But so you spoke with your friends about this. They knew you had this plan. But where did the plan start? I guess, we probably should have talked about this 10 minutes ago. But, so you come out of college, you're $40K in debt. I don't know at what point you met Winnie, if she had debt or not, but how did you guys formulate this plan, and how long did you think it would take, and how long, was it quicker or slower than you thought? Give us a real background on the actual plan, if you don't mind.
So let's see here. For me, having debt at all was a pretty terrifying thing. So when I graduated from college, my whole life was focused on paying off those student loans. And it took about 6 years, but in that process, I was not taking vacations because my employer at the time would cash out my vacation time. It was extra money, let's do that. And, for a short while at the beginning of my career, I actually made some overtime pay, and so I was working long hours. And after 6 years, I finally took a vacation. And in the middle of that, I basically realized I never wanted to go back to work again.
Nice.
And let's see here. I came back from that vacation. This was before I met Winnie. So I came back from that vacation and started piecing the big plan together. And at the time, there was nobody. There was nobody out there as a role model, I guess, to follow. I didn't know how to even start, and so it took a while to kind of gain some traction. But once I started kind of piecing it together, I put it on about a 10-year timeline based on just the very simple stuff I mentioned earlier. Of if you save 50%, you have enough to afterwards to save to take 1 year off, and it actually worked out pretty close to that. I quit about 10 years in a day after after I originally formulated the plan.
Yeah, that's amazing. 10 years in one day. So that's pretty damn good planning. That's for sure. So yeah, so the timeline was you graduated in 96, you said. It was about 6 years to pay it off. So 2002 you started, and then roughly 2012 was the actual fire date. That's incredible.
And I actually we had hit the point where we spend way more money now than we did when we were saving and accumulating. But when about 7 years later, our investment income was already paying our bills in Seattle. And so I was still working, and we were just socking away the whole paycheck basically at that point. So we probably could have called it quits a little earlier, but we were still a little nervous after 2008. So I just wanted to pad things a little bit.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask next is, was there any actual hesitation when, that 10 years in one day came around? Like, was it just, okay, we reached it, I'm done, here, put in my 2 weeks? Or what was the thought process? I think people want to know, like, you've gone through this, you've actually done it. Most people are going to be, A, not sure they can do it, or B, just scared when the time comes. Like, talk us through the actual psychology of what happened, that month when you took the plunge.
Well, there was actually a little bit of drama involved. I think I had a little bit of assistance walking out the door, and that I was having some, relationship management issues with a couple of people at work. And, we kind of had a little bit of a talk, and it was like, well, I'm really not interested in fixing any of this, so I'm out.
Nice.
I know my management team and whatever did not expect that kind of conversation to go that way at all, and so there were all kinds of conversations after that, and I was really good friends with our VP, and as I was walking out the door, he basically hugged me and wouldn't let me go, and he's like, "You're welcome back anytime you want, even tomorrow." And that made me cry, actually. It was pretty touching, and it was like, here I am leaving this place I've worked for 12 years now, and 6 months after, I was already so far gone from the workplace that even at that point I had realized there was no way I could ever go back.
In fact, I just noticed, I think it's really cool because I just noticed you sent a tweet out the other day saying, "How did I ever have time for work?"
Yeah. I don't know.
That's awesome.
Our life is so full right now. Like how are you ever supposed to actually put 40 hours into a job when the rest of your day is so full already?
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That also reminds me of, Jim Collins' concept of FU money, right? You're there, you're at your FI number, you go in. I mean, they don't expect you to walk out, right? I mean, who does that? It's amazing. It's just such what I always like to say is this allows you to wrest control back of your life from everyone else, whoever that they may be. It's you have the control then. You reach your number, you wanted to walk out and leave, I'm not changing, goodbye. I mean, honestly, who does that? Who has the ability to do that? It's amazing. So good for you, man.
And I think because even before our investment income was paying our bills, so somewhere maybe like 4 or 5 years into the plan, I had already kind of realized like we were on the right trajectory, and that even if that job option were to just disappear forever, right? I still had like a great position, and everything would go forward fine, right? And so my confidence in my position at work just skyrocketed. And when you're in a place of employment where you're comfortable with just saying no to things, like when people are scared of losing their job because they're not going to pay their mortgage and their boss asks them to do something really stupid, people are going to say yes, right? But when you can say, I don't think that's the best way to do it, and this is how I think we should go forward, and and you can kind of give them that feedback and openly and confidently, they suddenly start going from like, hey, Jeremy's just like here to, he'll do whatever we say, he's a total pushover, to like, hey, this guy's a go-getter, we should put him on the fast track, like maybe he needs a promotion, and so all this stuff just started going positively in my career after that point. And it's like income grew faster, opportunities grew faster, I began having more fun with the job. And so, just having that FU money, or the basis of FU money, and not even having to say FU, just saying no, is a really powerful place to be.
That's so powerful. I'm still on the employee track, so I understand everything you're saying. I'm living it right there with you. That is incredibly powerful. And I don't think I've read that on your blog per se, although maybe you have an article about that. But I'm really glad that you shared that perspective with us just now.
I don't think I've written about it before. I wrote a guest post on Budgets Are Sexy, where I talked about my walk out the door. And I think that's definitely a good read. But yeah, I haven't written about my career growth as a result of the FU money, though.
Cool. And everybody, will link to all these links that we talk about in the show notes. It's ChooseFI.com/018.
So right now you've basically you've slashed your expenses, and you've hit on a couple of the triggers that we were just talking about. You have this incredible margin in your life now, and so what I know that you're investing the difference, but how are you investing the difference?
So when I first started actually thinking about, hey, I need some money from something other than like my savings account, right, and something from my job, I actually hired a financial advisor for a while, and I learned a lot, but mostly I learned that I don't need a financial advisor. So we parted way after like a year or so, and I just started putting everything in index funds. But during that year, I was messing around with trying to get some rental real estate on the side. I experimented with hard money lending, and I was lending money to people who were flipping homes. But ultimately, just like personality wise and total long term prospects, right now everything we have is just in index funds.
Index funds, okay. And I know you listed J.L. Collins was a really good source of reference for you as you were kind of learning what that process should look like. And was that also instrumental when you just did finally decide to ditch the financial advisor? Was kind of his teaching in some way a part of that, or did you find him afterwards?
I think I found him after, but he definitely helped with consolidation. Right? So I had more. I probably had like 10 different funds at that time, and now we basically have 2. Right. So we've narrowed everything down to just the total U.S. market from Vanguard, the VTSAX, and then the total outside the U.S., the total world. I don't know what the mutual fund ticker is, the VXUS ETF.
Cool. So everything's in those 2. That makes sense. Hey, we actually just had Brandon from the Mad Scientist on last week's show, and he mentioned that we were trying to dive into his advice versus, anywhere that he might, fall down on that personally and not, perfectly optimize. And, he was saying that he sometimes, in a silly manner tries to like time the market, or even though he knows it's stupid, and, not just automate all of his investing on a perfect schedule. Like, do you find that you fall down in any instances, investing wise, where, you're looking at the market, or do you just set up any kind of automatic transfers to Vanguard? What do you do specifically to keep your brain out of it, or conversely, do you fall down in any instances?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't know how Brandon is. Brandon and Jill were just here actually, like a couple months ago, and Jim and Jane, Jim Collins passed through also about a month ago. But I think I pretty much made all of those mistakes. Trying to time the market, trying to outthink everything. And I think this is one area where my laziness has just helped, actually. So I just kind of give it up and just let it go and let it take care of itself. So I don't even really mess with it anymore. I don't even really look at what the market's doing anymore.
So I love what you have here. You said, now the savings account is starting to grow by leaps and bounds. We have to put that money to work. Learning to invest is probably the most valuable skill one could ever learn. And Jim Collins has laid it out in an easy-to-use stock series. This 2-hour reading adventure explains not only how to invest, but the psychology behind it. And this is my favorite line that you have here. The stock market is one of the greatest wealth-creating vehicles ever created, perhaps second only to a bicycle. And it is a critical component of building a portfolio that will support a retirement of 60 years. I have been so resistant to the bicycle, and I don't know if it's because my job is, 15 miles away or whatever it is, but I love that the common theme I see between you guys that have hit this and nailed it by the time you were 30 is that stupid freaking bicycle. And I need to do it. I need to just get one and do it. I don't even know what it would look like. I can't visualize how I would implement it in my life, but that to me seems like that's the last frontier. They figured it out. I just need to try it, and it's going to like transform my life. I don't know. And I live in a hipster city where everybody has bicycles. It's all over the place, but I don't have one.
Yeah. I mean, I even still have one now. Actually, my son calls it the daddy car. He's like, he's only 2, so he he talks nonstop, but most of what he says I don't understand. But Daddy Car rings through clearly. That he'll come up to me and just be like pulling on my jeans, Daddy Car, and then we have to go for a bike ride.
I know the final tip here, and we won't get into this because I know we really want to unpack this how to never pay taxes again, which we promised our audience. But the final tip to that is just wait. And wait just means the math works for you. It's compound interest, right?
Yeah, and the weird thing that I think I've just kind of recently sort of come to have peace with, like I understood the math. I studied engineering and I did lots of math, and you see the compound interest mechanics and you draw a chart of what it looks like. But I don't think you really kind of grasp it until you truly live it. And we've been retired for about 5 years now. And even though we just spend, whatever we kind of feel like we want to, and we travel all over the place and we've been to 30 some countries and whatever, we still have way more money than when I quit. And that's just the math work. The system works. Just relax and let it do its thing, and it'll work for you too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And at this point, I assume your blog is bringing in some income. So are you drawing down on your nest egg at all, or is the blog income kind of covering your lifestyle?
Let's see here. Last year, I don't know what it made in 2016 yet, but 2015 it made about 40K, and I think we spent about 60K. So, but I still haven't sold any shares from when we quit. We've only been living off of income from dividends and so on. But we just started when we left the U.S. The idea was the first several years we would go to kind of extremely low cost of living countries, so that even though we were living like kings of yesteryear or whatever, it just didn't cost very much. So we were spending $2,000 a month when we first left Mexico, Central America, Southeast Asia. And then last year we did mostly in Europe, and we were spending $6K a month. It was basically the same lifestyle in both places. It just costs less. Central South America.
So putting a cap on this, going back to that first sentence that we basically said, conceptually, retiring in your 30s is quite simple, albeit not easy. 1, maximize your income. 2, live well below your means. 3, invest the difference. And 4 is wait. And if you do that for about 10 years, you will find yourself where Go Curry Cracker found himself. So thanks for kind of putting that together for us. And I know what we really want to do now is go into some of these tax levers that you have really figured out how to optimize. And specifically, probably the most clickbait title of all time, but there's actually meat behind it. Never pay taxes again.
Yeah. So we've filed four years of income tax returns, and since leaving my job, and each one of those years, the total amount of taxable income written on there between investments and blog income and whatever was about $100,000. And our tax bill each of those 4 years, income tax bill each of those 4 years was $0. And 2015, the IRS actually just paid us $5.
And what I love about this concept that we're really going to get into is everybody has a reason to not want to pay taxes. Maybe it's moral or political reasons. 4 years ago, there was probably a whole group of people that didn't want to pay taxes. Probably now it's a completely different group of people that don't want to pay taxes. It always shifts, but over time, different people don't want to pay taxes for different reasons. But in the FIRE community, even once you put the political and moral reasons aside, we don't want to pay taxes because if we have to pay less in taxes, then that means that we don't need to save as much. That's the impetus for this conversation. That's kind of what we're thinking. How can we take all the other tools that we figured out and then take the next logical step and figure out how we can send less to the government, keep more in our investable, taxable, or pre-tax accounts, and get to financial independence sooner. So I'm going to just set up the concept here, and then we're going to really unpack it. I believe where we're going to head with this is you basically figured out that you can live, or if you want to draw $20,000 in taxable income, you can basically get up to another, $70,000 in dividend related income, and you can essentially never pay taxes on that money. Is that what I understood? Did I say that close to right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So $90,000 a year, you can get $90,000 a year in your bank account every year for you to cover your living expenses and not pay a dime in federal tax.
Yeah, if you can earn that, if you can get that income from a combination of qualified dividends and long-term capital gains, then your tax rate on income below about 100K is 0%.
I can't even comprehend that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So talk us through that real quick. As I understand it, it's the harvesting the capital gains is a big aspect of that, right, Jeremy? Can you talk the audience through how that works?
Yes. Let's look at, say you're a married couple, you got this 100K of tax-free income potential, but you're not actually making 100K, right? Let's say you got half of that. Well, that other 50,000, that other half, that other 50K of potential tax-free income, you don't just want to waste it. Oh, well, this year it's gone forever if you don't use it. So what you can do is you can take any sort of, any sort of stocks that you hold in your brokerage account, in your taxable account. And if you can find 50K of gains in there, you could sell your fund with, choose the specific shares that it works out where you end up with a 50K gain, and then buy it back, buy a similar fund back. And now you've generated a taxable event this year. You have a sale with a gain. The tax rate just happens to be 0, but now your basis is 50K higher. And so next year you could do it again or not, but that money will essentially be tax-free forever.
So that sounds amazing. And what we really want to get across to people is how they can actually go about doing this. Can you maybe give us some specific examples about what that would look like in practice with maybe some specific funds?
Sure. So like I mentioned, we hold most of our portfolio in Vanguard's total U.S. market fund. And you can basically just sell that fund, it's 50K gain worth, buy that exact same fund back, and you've raised your basis. You have your taxable event, and you're done. That's it. There's no need to complicate it with I need to switch funds or I need to move into a different index tracking system or anything. Like people worry a little bit about the wash sale rule, right? They think, oh, if I sell a fund and then I buy back the same fund, then the government won't let me claim my deduction for that year. And this is a completely different thing, because what the wash sale rule was written to prevent you taking a loss, right, where the government's going to give you money this year, and so preventing you from sort of just selling something that's down so that you can claim a loss on your income taxes and get a deduction. In this case, what you're doing is you're claiming a gain. You're telling the government, like, I made a profit, please tax me. They're just choosing not to do so.
That's awesome.
And so there's no reason to worry about switching funds or whatever. Just sell the one you have, buy it back, and off you go. Your basis is higher and you're home free.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's just looking at it differently. It's looking at a problem slightly differently, because nobody's thinking about that. I know, honestly, I've emailed with you a couple times over the last 5 years about this specifically. And, I feel like a moron because my wife and I are both CPAs. And, we're literally sitting there reading your articles with our jaws just dropping, because it's, honestly, we just hadn't thought about it. You always hear the wash, the wash sale rules and the capital losses, but nobody's thinking about harvesting capital gains on such a monumental scale. And, I just want to make sure everybody understands this is, taking your unrealized gains in your investment account, selling them, even though it's, as Jeremy said, it's a taxable event, but because they're in the 10 or 15% bracket, the tax rate on that is 0. So it's stepping up the basis. So, you're rebuying it back at this higher level. And then it essentially, not only does it's not deferring the tax, it's eliminating it. Your basis is higher.
Wow.
So the next time you go to sell, you're buying at this stepped up basis. I mean, that is just such a remarkable thing. I can't tell you how impressed I was when we read that.
And I got to add on 2 more points to that too, because I'm getting super excited being able to visualize this now. So first of all, what you're doing, you're talking about strategic tax planning. So you're essentially creating these buckets that you're filling, kind of like when we talked to Brad, when we talked to Millionaire Educator, he was looking at the same thing, how much he could fill his buckets with before he rolls into the 10 to 15%. We're getting more complex with it. We're going to graduate level. How do you actually tie your investment income into that? But then the other half of this, once you've increased your basis, doesn't that then make it easier for you then to look at capital losses later on?
Yeah. So one of the biggest, I guess, one of the biggest challenges people have with sort of like continually harvesting losses, like the thing everybody talks about, I'm going to harvest losses, is that once the market's gone up, you don't have any losses anymore. There's nothing to harvest, right? But if you can continually step up your basis every year, then you always have something kind of sitting around at around the current stock price, at the current market price. And because the market, stocks are volatile, they'll come down, they'll go up. And when they dip, you're able to kind of snag a little loss.
Jeremy, this literally, like, I've read your article. I've read it. I mean, I've read it over and over and over again. But right now, it just crystallized how crazy awesome this is. This is unbelievable. This is so freaking cool.
Yes, just remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, for everybody out there, this is master's level FI type strategy. This is really brilliant
this
stuff.
only works for FI. No one else can do this. If you're having to claim your income all the time, you can't do what we're talking about. You can only do this because you already focused on the defense first. You focused on crushing your expenses. You have this. In the United States, we tax spenders. And we reward savers. So if you do this, if you follow the first couple rules and now it only costs you 30 grand to live, you have this 70 grand window that you can always have available as you start growing more and more in these investments accounts, that you can constantly move up your basis. And then when you need it, then you can bring it back down through capital losses. This is unbelievable. And you can only do this if you're in the FI community.
Yeah, it's a very, if I were the person who wrote the tax laws, I would do it in a different way. You have to be in the right place. You have to be fairly wealthy in the first place just to be able to generate this much in gains. And then you have to be living a fairly kind of low income lifestyle such that you're in these lower tax brackets.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the other kind of real high level tax planning strategy you're doing is the Roth IRA conversion ladder, right?
Yeah. So what we just talked about was all like filling all of your brackets to the top, right? Getting as much as possible into that 0% capital gain and dividend tax bracket. You have something also on the bottom side where you get your standard deduction and personal exemptions, which for a married couple is about $20K a year. And if you don't have earned income, if you don't have $20K of earned income because you're retired, and you don't have sort of other things that they classify as earned income, like interest from your savings account and rental property income and so on, then you can choose to just like we harvested a gain, you can choose to create income for the purposes of taxes that could be taxed at 0% because it can be wiped out by your standard deduction and personal exemptions. And the way we do that is the money that we contributed to our 401k and traditional IRA while we were working, so we could save that 25%-ish sort of tax rate then. Now we're going to say, remove some of the money from that account and put it into a Roth IRA. And the IRS calls that a conversion. It's taxable now, but it is, as long as you're under that 20K-ish limit, it's also taxed at 0%. And now you've basically paid 0% on the money you moved into your 401k because you got the deduction then. You pay 0% now because you're doing a legal conversion that's eliminated by your deductions. And then you never pay tax on the gains from there on out because it's in a Roth IRA and all withdrawals are never taxed. So it's like tax-free in, tax-free deferral, tax-free conversion, and tax-free withdrawal.
This is so cool. I'm starting to create this plan. Like you said, the financial freedom clock starts when you hit 0. And then you're starting to create these assets. And it's really cool to have a framework for what you're going to do with it down the road because it can guide a lot of your investing decisions. So there's a lot of our audience probably has a net worth over 100,000, over 500,000. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. And they are starting to think, wow, I can get this money out tax-free just by taking advantage of the financial framework that I've already created for myself. And that's awesome. I'm excited for you. But for the other people that maybe have a net worth of negative 20 or 10,000, or you're just now making it to debt-free, you're like, what's that next step look like? This is how you can start building that framework. And this is why you're going to start maxing out that 401k instead of, doing maybe an alternate option. These tools are just so powerful when you finally figure out how to put them into your own personal framework. Okay, Jeremy, so then the last part of this, we just talked about capital gains. We explained how powerful that is. We talked about the Roth conversion ladder. And then the last half of that was capital losses. So one thing we've already done by focusing on capital gains first, we've increased the basis, which creates an opportunity for us to now take advantage of this other lever, capital losses. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Sure. So let's say that you have, you've raised your basis every year, for the last several years, and then, the next recession comes and the stock market drops. You can sell some of the fund that you've raised your basis in and claim realize the loss that has occurred when the market dropped. And what that will do is, on your tax return, you'll have a place for your capital losses, and you can use up to $3,000 of that to offset your other income. You can use it to offset your if you're earning any income at that time, or you can actually increase the size of your Roth IRA conversion to account for that up to $3,000. Now, there are complications because everyone recognizes that you're basically doing this for the purpose of generating a tax loss. There are rules that you have to follow, and part of that is that you can't buy back the same fund. You can't go back into the exact same thing that you had just sold. And so you just have to sort of buy something that's substantively different from what you sold. So what you have to do then is, like, if you sold the Vanguard Total World or Total U.S. Market Fund, you would need to buy something that tracked a different index, so that the IRS won't look at it and go, "Oh, you're basically just doing this for the purposes of taxes. We're gonna wash it. We're gonna throw it out." So, for example, VTI, you sold that, you would buy, say, like the S&P 500 index fund, and then after a year, when you're now in the long-term gain status, you could then do it again. You could transfer it back into VTI at that point, or just continue with the S&P 500 fund. The key is just you can't buy and sell the exact same fund when you're doing it for a loss.
Okay. So that makes perfect sense. So yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you, which is, so the total stock market index and S&P 500 are different enough that they don't get caught up in the wash sale rule. Right.
Yeah, and as far as I know, this has never been litigated, but the consensus in the, I guess, community of investors and so on is the way the IRS defines substantially or substantively different is just that they don't track the same index.
Gotcha. Okay, and just we're always looking for actionable tips for the audience. So, let's say someone's been investing dutifully in Vanguard every week or every month and buying new shares, and, they have their pot of money, right? And it's, made up of hundreds of different purchases over the years. Is there a way, when you're going in to harvest the capital losses and capital gains, like, how do you specifically identify, like, the shares? Is that something that, without having Vanguard open in front of you, like, is that something you can explain, like, how you actually go about doing that, as opposed to just clicking the generic sell button?
Yeah. So they have, there are basically three ways that you can choose. You can do first in, first out. You can do just like a weighted average of everything, or you can do a specific shares. And so you're just going to go back in and look at your trade record when you are choosing to sell, and you're going to click and say, I want this batch and this batch and this batch. And you'll just base it off of which ones are at least a year old for the long-term status, and which ones have the, I just picked the lowest purchase price ever, so I can raise the lowest value up, and then you sell those shares. The whole interface is very clear. You just say, I bought this one for 10, this one for 20. Like, I want to sell the ones that I bought for 10.
Gotcha.
Those are some extremely powerful tools. Those are probably some of the most powerful tools when it comes to what to do with your investment income that I've heard anybody mention up to this point. And I think you did a great job unpacking that. You did a great job in your article, but I think I must be just an audio learner. And so hearing you just unpack it for me verbally, for me, the light bulb went off today, and I know what I'm going to do over the next 5 years. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure.
One of the final thing on that, just real quick, to me, it seems like you have this game now that you can play, and you win when the stock market goes up. You win when the stock market goes down. You have an action that you're waiting for. So when the stock market goes down, the normal person out there screaming, is it the end of the world? All that sort of thing. And yeah, it sucks to see your money go down, but you have a play that's been in the bag that you've been waiting for. And when it goes down, instead of you going to panic mode, you're just, okay, this is my chance to get $3,000 in taxable, loss. And so I love that it doesn't matter what's going on in the market. You're looking at it differently. You're looking at it almost from that billionaire perspective where it's so much more of a sophisticated play. Is that how you look at it as well?
Well, I would still prefer for it to go up.
yeah,
of course.
But when the opportunity's there, you have to take it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of basically our content. I love that. I've been looking forward to this. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I've been waiting for somebody to really explain how all this fit together in my framework. And you did that today. But now, Jeremy, I am super excited to introduce you to our hot seat. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the ChooseFI Hot Seat.
Go big or go home.
I don't know what to expect. I'm scared.
Like I said, set the bar really, really high. All right. So we got a couple questions that we're just going to throw at you and we're going to see what sticks. Question number 1, favorite blog that's not your own.
Ooh. Let's see here. I'm going to go with Mr. Collins.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one. So JL Collins, and specifically, is that the stock series?
Yeah. I just like his sort of take on the world, but here's the thing that I like, you can learn the mechanics of investing from anybody but the main thing that separates like a good investor from a poor investor or a long-term winning investor from a losing one is mostly philosophy, and Jim does a really good job of kind of conveying it's okay, relax, the market's going to drop, you're going to deal with it, and you're going to be fine. And so that voice shines through, and that's really what kind of has drawn me to his stuff over the years.
Yeah, that's cool. We're actually speaking with Jim later today, and he'll be our next guest on the podcast. So anything that you can think of we should ask him that you think the audience would find valuable?
Well, just definitely don't tell him I said all that good stuff about him.
I think you already you plug in his book, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, the main thing for him, I think the more you can focus on the philosophy side of it, the better. Just like why it's okay, why you don't need to panic in a downturn. I guess how to kind of get over the voice that's telling you hey, of course I can do better than the index fund. I'm really smart and I'm good at this stuff, and how you kind of defeat that voice and so on. He does a really good job of walking through that.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Jeremy. Number 2, your favorite article of all time, either on your site or another site, whatever you choose.
Let's see. This is tough. All right, I'm gonna pick 2 if that's all right.
Yeah.
My first one is Jim has a blog post about how to give like a billionaire. And I like this in 2 ways. One, because it helps, it kind of gives people like that focus on like giving back and kind of helping society and making the world a better place. But it also makes sure you get the maximum tax deduction for doing so. And so that strikes me in 2 different places. And then the other one is I really like the favorite post that I've written is this one called "They Will Kill You for Your Shoes," and it just walks through the kind of irrationality that people have about being afraid of every place that isn't where they currently live. It's based off the idea that a friend of mine was visiting us from LA. He's visiting Guatemala, and somebody on the flight had basically said to him, like, "Oh my God, you're going to Guatemala? Like, they kill people there for their shoes." And I'm like, did he just describe LA? But there's also like the town we were in had this local shoe manufacturer. So I think they got better shoes from local. But just people generally tend to fear kind of the places they haven't been. And so I address that in a fun way.
All right. Question number 3, your favorite life hack of all time.
That has to be credit card rewards points. I haven't paid for a flight in the last couple of years just because of strategically using credit cards and sign-up bonuses.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. And I love your example. I'm going to talk to Brad about that some more later because that is really cool. One of the things I haven't figured out, I haven't been willing to do is pull the trigger and upgrade to business class because I just like my points to go farther. But I love, you crushed it with that redemption. I mean, you totally crushed it.
Well, and here's the thing, like with that one, is we're flying the day before our son turns 2 years old. Okay,
Nice.
so he can still sit in our lap, right? Like he's still a legal lap carry. But if we were going to fly coach, like there's no way we're going to let him sit in our lap for like 14, 16 hours. Like it's just not going to happen. But those business class seats, like we'll chill and let him hang out back there, and like no problem. But if we were to use miles to get him his own seat in coach, it would actually cost us more points than if we went the day earlier in business. So I upgrade strategically.
That's very cool. Yeah. And it's like what you just mentioned reminds me of what we did when we went to Disney World in kind of a weird way is people like us, we look at the rules and we try to maximize them as much as possible. You're going the day before his birthday when he wouldn't be a free lap child anymore. Right. And like we went though this is a much smaller dollar figure, but my younger daughter was just going to turn 3. We went the week before her birthday, and kids under 3 get in for free to the Disney World park. So, we paid $0 for her park ticket, whereas if we went a week later, it would have been $400 or something. So it's just knowing those rules and maximizing them as much as possible.
Yeah, and when you don't have like a day job and you have that flexibility, like you fly on a certain day, and we're flying on a Tuesday or something, right? And you can take that specific week of that specific week, you can go to Disneyland, where like if you have a job, you might not have that flexibility.
That's awesome. Question number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
Wow. I've made a lot of them. Well, let's see here. I bought a house. I bought a rental property that I might have to foreclose on again. And I got married. Not this wife, the previous one.
Oh, okay. Question number 5, the advice you would give your younger self.
Well, let me just tell you, I would not have gotten married at 20 years old. Don't do that. You don't even know yourself until you're like 35.
So the average age should be 35 for everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay. Nice. All right. Yeah, documented.
Yeah. That's my official recommendation.
Nice.
Yeah. No, but
I like that other quote from earlier. Upgrade strategically. It's incredibly tweetable. I'm going to send it out.
Yeah. Well, I definitely did that, but plus Winnie's here listening, so I definitely upgraded strategically there.
Very cool. Hey, last one is a little bonus question we like to throw in is the best or your favorite purchase you made on Amazon.com last year?
We haven't been in the US, so I haven't purchased anything on Amazon. We don't buy a lot of stuff actually, but my favorite purchase by far in the last year is I just got a new iPhone 7 Plus, and I know that's not a frugal thing, but it is amazing. And I basically used my old iPhone for like 4 years, and then I lost it like 9 months ago. Or I think it was stolen in Naples actually. So I didn't have a phone at all for like 9 months, and then I got this new iPhone 7 Plus, and it is amazing.
How do you do your cell phone service there? Is that a pay as you go? Do you have a pay for a premium service? What do you guys do?
Yeah. I just use pay as you go.
Okay. All right.
So cool. we just get a new SIM in whatever country we go to.
Cool. What do you think you pay per month on average for the service?
I would say like $30, something like that. Nice. And I've been thinking about getting like what is it, Google Fi?
Yeah, Project Fi. It's awesome.
Yeah, because we don't really do voice at all. It's all data now.
There may even be a way to bring your Unlock 7 over. I think I've heard like it would be one of those things where you'd have to dig it up on a forum, but it's not something that's kosher. It's not something they approve or want, but there may even be a way to do that.
Yeah, they probably do it all on Android stuff, huh?
Yeah, you'd have to go and it's a great phone. I have it's the Nexus. It's really, really good. So I highly recommend it. I love it. But if you guys have a good thing going on, $30 a month isn't bad. I feel like in America, the iPhone is always tethered to a $60 or $100 a month payment or plan. I don't know. Yeah. They just have the whole market locked down here.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
All right, Jeremy. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been invaluable. I think I've already told you over and over again how much I got out of this episode. How can people connect with you if they want to get involved in your community and find out more about all the content that you've been creating over the last 5 years?
So we are on, gocurrycracker.com. We also hang out a lot on Facebook, Go Curry Cracker, on Twitter for Go Curry Cracker, and Instagram. And there are links there for contacting and email and so on. So just reach out and say hi.
Yeah, and just again, we'll have all these things linked up in the show notes. It's ChooseFI.com/018.
Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a good time.
Well, guys, how cool is this? This is what actionable actually looks like. We were able to go so deep into some of these concepts, talking about how they all fit together. And this was super high level stuff. Harvesting the capital gains is such a game changer. Talking about how you can never pay federal taxes again. You can control your tax rate. This is one of the superpowers that we talked about. This is the sort of episode that once you realize this, when you combine it with the concepts that we've talked about earlier, a Millionaire Educator, episode 13, maxing out those tax efficient vehicles, those tax advantage buckets. And then we talked about the Roth conversion ladder in episode 17R. This is one of these final pieces, capital gains harvesting. When you put all three of those together, it's almost unfair the advantage you have over someone that hasn't heard about all this stuff. Now, if you want to learn more about how capital gains harvesting can actually be applied in a real case study, we're going to take a look at that in the Friday roundup that's coming up this week. That'll be episode 18R. You can go directly to that episode by going to ChooseFI.com/018R. And these are the tools that we're talking about that are going to allow you to absolutely crush this game. So the fire is spreading, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to ChooseFI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.